everyone, and welcome back. You know how much we love to explore the unexplained, and based on the mountain of listener suggestions we've gotten, you guys are right there with us.
It's clear there's a huge fascination with the paranormal, and we're diving headfirst into your suggestions. And you know what I love about the sources you've sent in?
What's that?
They actually offer a really cool way to approach all this, a kind of tiered system for paranormal phenomena.
Oh, I like the sound of that. A good system always helps to make sense of things. So how does it work? What's the starting point?
Well, your source material kicks things off with what they call, and this is kind of fun, C tier. Basically, these are the experiences that a lot of us have had. You know, those moments where our brains try to make sense of things, especially when we're in situations that mess with our senses. Like, think about those times you're sure you see something out the corner of your eye in a dark room, but then nothing there.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like our brains are hardwired to jump to the spookiest conclusion possible. Must be a ghost. But really, it's just our eyes playing tricks on us. So what's the science behind that? Why do our senses seem to go haywire sometimes?
Well, take those shadows we were just talking about. In low light, your vision can get a little overloaded. You add in a bit of fatigue, maybe a little stress, and suddenly our brains start filling in the blanks, creating phantom figures where none actually exist.
So it's not really a ghost, it's just our tired brains trying to make sense of the dark. Okay, that's kind of reassuring, actually. But what about those other spooky sounds we associate with, say, old houses? Like creaking floorboards, things like that. Is that all just old plumbing, or do we have to bring ghosts into the equation?
Well, old houses definitely have their fair share of creaky pipes and settling foundations. But here's the thing, there's a psychological component at play, too. Think about it. For most of human history, a strange noise could have meant danger.
Right, it's like that instinct is still hardwired into us. Suddenly that creaky floorboard is more than just a noise, it's a warning.
Exactly. And your source material touches on this, how even these subtle sounds can tap into our deepest fears of the unknown. The creaking becomes more than just a sound, it's a doorway to those primal anxieties. And those anxieties get amplified in environments that we already associate with, well, ghost stories.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. So even if there's a perfectly logical explanation for that creepy sound, our brains are still wired to hear it as something spooky. Fascinating.
Isn't it? And this is where our journey through the tiers of the paranormal really gets interesting, because as we move from those C-tier sensory misinterpretations, we hit what your source calls B-tier. These are the paranormal reports that feel even more inexplicable, but
There's often a surprisingly simple explanation.
you got it. We're back and ready to delve deeper into those paranormal mysteries. Last time, we were on the verge of exploring what your sources call B-tier phenomena.
Right. The ones that at first glance seem like they must be paranormal, but often have more straightforward explanations. We're talking about those classic haunted house happenings, objects moving on their own, footsteps when you're home alone, electronics going haywire.
You've got it. And your sources really dig into these types of occurrences. Like, take those stories about objects moving mysteriously. The ones where people blame poltergeists or mischievous spirits.
Oh, absolutely. Who hasn't heard those stories about, like, the haunted antique shop where all the dolls rearrange themselves at night? Gives me chills just thinking about it. But you're going to tell me there's a perfectly logical explanation for all those creepy dolls and rogue teacups, aren't you?
Well, maybe not always perfectly logical, but often, yeah. It's about considering things we might not see or feel directly. Like, your source points out those subtle vibrations, things like traffic passing by, even wind, can actually cause objects to shift, maybe even fall off shelves. Wow. Especially in older homes.
So that painting that mysteriously falls off the wall might not be haunted, just vibrating. Makes you feel a little better, right?
Definitely less scary than a vengeful spirit redecorating. And what about those spooky footsteps we always hear about? Those are classics. A lot of times, your source suggests, those sounds are really just the house settling, pipes expanding or contracting.
So not a ghost, just the house stretching. I can get behind that.
Exactly. Things get more interesting, though, when we start talking about electronics acting up. Now, those feel a little creepier,
Oh, absolutely. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie. Our technology, suddenly it's rebelling, turning against us.
Right. But here's where our critical thinking comes in again. Your source is great about this, pointing out that most of these electronic disturbances, we can trace them back to normal things, faulty wiring, electromagnetic interference.
So that time, my laptop spontaneously started playing creepy Gregorian chants in the middle of the night.
Probably not demonic possession.
More likely just a bad Wi-Fi connection. Okay, good to know.
Right. But it's interesting, isn't it? This whole B tier, really highlights how our minds work, how we try to find patterns and meaning, even in random events. Like we'd rather invent a ghost story than face the idea that, say, our wiring is faulty.
It's true, but that's what makes exploring this all so fascinating. And it makes you think, if those are the more easily explained events, what about the ones that even science has a hard time with?
Exactly. Which leads us to the A tier. This is where the line between the explainable and the unexplainable really starts to get blurry.
Ooh, okay. Now we're getting to the good stuff. The really unexplained, the strange occurrences. We've got to dive into a tier. We are back and ready to explore the deep end of the paranormal pool, the A tier. These are the stories that make you wonder, okay, is there something really going on here?
Right. This is where the explanations get a lot more difficult. We're moving past those things we can easily debunk and into those experiences that are much harder to just dismiss.
So we're talking about those creepy whispers people hear, shadowy figures, even those strange orbs that show up in photos sometimes, the stuff that makes you want to sleep with the lights on.
Exactly. And it's interesting, your sources offer a few different perspectives on these A-tier mysteries. For example, those disembodied voices, those whispers. People often describe them as hearing someone calling their name. Ever experienced that?
Oh, totally. Usually late at night when I'm home alone and already a little creeped out. It's chilling. But is there, like, a scientific reason that our brains would do that? Conjure up those creepy whispers?
Your sources talk about something called auditory pareidolia. So basically like seeing shapes in clouds, but with sound. Our brains try to find patterns in random noises, especially when we're tired, stressed, or in a new place.
So it's like our brains are playing a spooky sound game, turning random creaks and hums into something scary. Makes sense. But what about those shadow figures people report seeing? Like in their peripheral vision, another trick of the mind.
It can be. Our brains are designed to pick up on movement, even when there's nothing actually there. Couple that with low light, shadows, our own quick eye movements. We can create the illusion that something's moving in the dark.
Right, that makes sense. But that doesn't explain those times when people see something more distinct, like something that sticks around long enough to know it's not just a fleeting shadow.
You're right. And those are the reports that really make you think. Your sources acknowledge this too. While we can chalk up a lot of the tier to misinterpretations, there are some cases that are harder to explain away, and those are the cases that keep paranormal researchers busy.
So even if science doesn't have all the answers right now, it's not ruling out that something unexplained might be happening.
Right.
Right.
And this brings us to where your sources really go deep. Those categories they classify as S tier and beyond. That's where we move beyond just the strange and into the truly bizarre.
Okay, now you're talking my language. This is where things get really interesting. We're talking full-bodied apparitions, things moving with impossible force, premonitions, maybe even psychic phenomena. This is the stuff that sends chills down your spine.
It is fascinating stuff. But it's important as we dive into the S tier and beyond to remember that a lot of these reports, they're highly subjective. Your sources emphasize how much personal interpretation, cultural beliefs, even just our own desire to believe, play into these experiences.
So a healthy dose of skepticism is still important.
Absolutely. But, and I think your sources would agree with me here, that doesn't mean we should shut down the possibilities altogether.
I love that. It's about being curious but critical. And honestly, that's what I love about this whole topic. The paranormal, by its very nature, it forces us to confront the limits of what we know.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole exploration so fascinating. We might never have all the answers, but the search is half the fun, right?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to everyone who sent in their paranormal experiences and sources. Keep them coming. And to everyone listening, until next time, keep exploring the unexplained.